The crystal palace of Astoria Prime glowed under 3 moons, each one casting a different color across the diamond towers that reached toward the stars. Tonight wasn't just any night. It was the most important ceremony in 1,000 years, maybe in the entire history of the Lysandran Empire. Every ruler from every planet, every noble family from every moon, every important person who had ever held power had traveled across the galaxy to be here. They came in ships made of gold and silver, in vessels powered by captured stars, in crafts that bent space and time just to arrive on schedule. All for one reason: to witness Emperor Zephyr present his twin cubs to the Empire. This wasn't just tradition. This was law older than memory. Without this ceremony, without the formal presentation of heirs, the succession would be broken. And a broken succession meant war. Not just any war, the kind that would tear apart star systems and leave planets burning for generations. The throne room had been prepared for months. Every crystal had been polished until it could blind you with its brilliance. Every tapestry had been woven with thread made from comet tails. The floor itself was carved from a single piece of midnight stone, so black it looked like walking on space itself. And at the center, raised on a platform of pure light, sat 2 golden pods where the cubs should have been waiting. Emperor Zephyr walked toward those pods with the confidence of someone who had ruled for 50 years. His mane, golden like a sunset over desert worlds, caught the light of the floating crystals. His claws, each one sharp enough to cut through steel, clicked against the midnight floor. Behind him, Empress Celestia glided like water, her telepathic presence calming the nervous energy of the crowd. The silk cushions in the pods were still warm. Tiny indentations showed where small bodies had been sitting just moments ago. But the pods were empty. Where are my heirs? The Emperor's voice, which had made entire armies surrender with a whisper, cracked like ice breaking on a frozen lake. The silence that followed was so complete, so absolute, that you could hear the heartbeat of a mouse 3 floors down. 1,000 nobles, each one trained from birth never to show weakness, stood frozen like statues. The floating crystals actually dimmed, responding to the Emperor's emotional state. Empress Celestia's telepathic scream ripped through every mind in the room. It wasn't words, it was pure maternal terror, the kind of sound that made even battle-hardened generals remember being children afraid of the dark. Wine glasses shattered. Several nobles with weaker mental shields actually collapsed. Lord Chancellor Voss, whose family had served the imperial line since before humans even knew there were other worlds, moved with shaking hands to the emergency panel. His fingers, usually so steady they could thread a needle in an earthquake, trembled as he pressed the code platinum button. Lock down everything. Every door, every window, every vent, every crack in every wall. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out. If a dust particle tries to leave this palace, I want it arrested. The implications hit everyone at once. Without the cubs, 4-year-old Luna and Sol, there could be no ceremony. Without the ceremony, the succession was void. Without succession, the empire would shatter into 1,000 pieces, each noble family claiming their right to rule. It would be civil war on a galactic scale. Captain Thorek, a warrior who had fought in 17 campaigns and had scars from creatures most people only saw in nightmares, deployed his guards with military precision. I want every room searched. Every closet opened. Every shadow investigated. Turn over every piece of furniture. Check behind every painting. If those cubs are hidden in a teacup, I want that teacup found. The search began like a military invasion. The palace, which normally moved with the quiet dignity of ancient power, exploded into controlled chaos. Guards ran through hallways that hadn't seen such urgency in centuries. Doors that had been closed for decades were forced open. Secret passages that only the oldest servants knew about were discovered and explored. The noble quarters came first. 40 royal suites, each one larger than most people's entire homes, were searched from ceiling to floor. Guards looked under beds worth more than planets, inside wardrobes that could hold entire armies, behind tapestries that told the history of the universe. No cubs. Check the guard barracks, Thorek ordered, though he knew it was unlikely. 300 soldiers stood at perfect attention while their personal spaces were torn apart. Bunks were overturned. Lockers were emptied. Even the memorial wall, where they honored fallen comrades, was checked for secret compartments. No cubs. The guest wings held dignitaries from 70 different worlds. Each room was searched with apologetic efficiency. "Pardon the intrusion, Ambassador, but we must check your quarters." Angry protests were ignored. This was bigger than diplomatic courtesy. No cubs. "The thermal scanners are malfunctioning in the lower levels," the security chief reported, his green scales pale with stress. "There's interference from the kitchens. Those old stone ovens are putting out too much heat. It's scrambling our readings." Lord Voss waved his hand dismissively. "The kitchens? Don't waste time. The cubs would never go near the servant quarters. They've been taught since birth that such areas are beneath them. Check the throne room again. They must be hiding somewhere we missed." Nobody, not one single person in that room full of the galaxy's most powerful beings, thought to actually search where the servants lived and worked. It was like looking for a lost diamond in a garbage dump. Impossible. Unthinkable. Imperial cubs were pure-blooded Lysandrans raised to rule worlds. They no more visited servant quarters than they would swim in sewage. Meanwhile, 3 levels below all this panic, in the oldest part of the palace where the original stones still showed through modern additions, Rosie Brennan worked alone in the night kitchen. This was the kitchen that fed the servants, not the 17 other kitchens that prepared food for nobles. This was where simple bread was made, where basic soup was cooked, where the invisible people who kept the palace running came to eat. Rosie had been doing this job for 40 years. 40 years of waking up at midnight to start the ovens. 40 years of kneading dough until her fingers knew the motion better than her own name. 40 years of being invisible, just another pair of hands that kept the palace fed. Her apron told the story of those years. It had started white, pristine, a symbol of her new position when she was just 18 and fresh from Earth. Now it was a patchwork of repairs, a red patch from when she'd caught it on a nail 10 years ago, a blue patch from when acid had eaten through during a cleaning accident, a green patch from when she'd used it to wrap a wounded guard's arm and the blood had never quite washed out. Every patch was a memory, every thread a year of service. Tonight, that apron bulged strangely at the pockets. "Heavy stones today," she muttered to herself, adjusting the weight distribution. She always carried heated stones for her arthritis. 40 years of kneading dough in cold kitchens had taken their toll on her joints. But tonight they seemed especially warm, almost alive with heat. A soft chirping sound, like a baby bird calling for its mother, came from her left pocket. "Now the ovens are singing to me," Rosie chuckled, her voice rough from years of breathing flour dust. "This old palace gets stranger every year. First the walls whisper, now the ovens chirp. What's next, dancing bread?" She opened the ancient iron door of oven number 3, her favorite because it heated evenly and never burned the bottom, and slid in another loaf. The smell of baking bread filled the kitchen, warm and comforting like a hug from someone you love. A tiny voice, so quiet it could have been wind through cracks in the stone, whispered from her right pocket, "Smells good, Rosie soft." But Rosie didn't hear it. She was humming now, louder than the voice, an old Earth lullaby her grandmother had taught her back when Earth was still just learning about other worlds. It was a song about mockingbirds and diamond rings, about mothers and fathers and love that never ended. She'd been humming it for so many years that the kitchen walls seemed to know the tune. As she kneaded the next batch of dough, her pockets shifted. Something inside moved, adjusted, settled into a more comfortable position. She patted the pocket absently, the way you might pat a pet, not really thinking about it. "Settle down, stones. We've got 3 more hours of work." Above her, guards were breaking down doors. Above her, nobles were fainting from stress. Above her, an empire was tilting toward chaos. But down here in the servants' kitchen, Rosie Brennan kneaded dough and hummed old songs, completely unaware that the future of the galaxy was curled up in her apron pockets, sleeping to the rhythm of her work. The clock on the wall, so old its numbers were worn almost smooth, ticked toward the 3rd hour of the morning shift. Rosie reached for her water bottle, an ancient thing made of earth steel that had traveled with her across the stars. As she lifted it to drink, her apron shifted. 2 pairs of golden eyes blinked up at her from her pockets. The water bottle crashed to the floor, the sound echoing through the empty kitchen like thunder. Rosie's legs turned to jelly. She gripped the counter to keep from falling, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. These weren't heated stones. These were the Imperial cubs, the heirs to an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds, and they were curled up in her apron pockets like kittens in a basket. "Hello, Rosie-mama," Luna said, her tiny voice filled with sleepy contentment. Rosie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No sound came out. Her brain, which had worked perfectly fine for 58 years, seemed to have stopped functioning entirely. These were the cubs she'd only seen from a distance during ceremonies, tiny figures in golden robes standing beside the throne. She'd never been closer than 300 feet to them. Servants weren't allowed in the same room as royalty unless they were actively serving, and even then they were supposed to be invisible. Touching a royal cub was punishable by death. Not a quick death either, the kind that took days and was broadcast across the empire as a warning. And here were both cubs, not just touching her but sleeping in her pockets, calling her mama. Your Highnesses." Her voice came out as a squeak that would have embarrassed a mouse. "You can't. I'm not. This is." Luna reached up with a tiny pawed hand, her fur soft as silk but matted slightly from sleep. "Rosie-mama found us." Sol popped his head out of the other pocket, his golden eyes bright with mischief. "We're really good at hiding. Nobody found us for so long." "How long?" Rosie managed to whisper, though her throat felt like she'd swallowed sand. "How long have you been in there?" The cubs looked at each other, communicating in that silent way that twins do, telepathic or not. "Many days," Luna announced proudly. "Weeks and weeks. You share sweet bread with us every night." The pieces fell into place like a puzzle Rosie hadn't known she was solving. The extra crumbs she'd been finding. The way her food seemed to disappear faster than it should. The warm weight in her pockets she'd attributed to stones. The soft sounds she'd thought were the old palace settling. "You've been visiting me for weeks?" Her voice rose an octave. "Every night." "Not every night," Sol corrected seriously. "Sometimes you have nights off. Those nights are cold and sad. But most nights you're here," Luna added. Warm Rosie-mama with the soft pockets and good smells. Memories flooded back, but now they made sense. The feeling of being followed in the servants' stairs, not creepy but curious, like something small padding after her. The way her humming sometimes seemed to have an echo. The nights when she'd shared her meager dinner with the heir, talking to herself because 40 years of night shifts made you a little crazy, not knowing tiny ears were listening to every word. "Your Highnesses must go back," Rosie said, though even as she said it, her hands moved protectively to cover her pockets. "Your father is terrified. Your mother is screaming. The whole palace." "No." Both cubs pressed deeper into her pockets, becoming small balls of fur and determination. "Palace cold. Palace hurts. Rosie warm. Rosie safe. But I'm just a servant." "You're Rosie-mama," Luna said simply, as if that explained everything. She held up her tiny paw, showing a small cut from that morning's combat training. "Royal healers put burning medicine. You put kiss and make better." Rosie's heart, which she'd thought had turned to stone after 40 years of being invisible, cracked like an egg. These weren't just royal cubs. They were children, lonely, scared children who had found comfort in the last place anyone would look for it. "Show me," she said softly. Luna held out her paw. Without thinking, Rosie did what she'd done for her 12 younger siblings back on Earth. She kissed the hurt, pulled out the small medical kit she always kept, kitchens were dangerous, and wrapped the tiny paw with gentle efficiency. "There. All better." Sol crawled out of his pocket and hugged Rosie's arm. "Rosie-mama makes everything better. That's why we come." "Tell me," Rosie said, sitting on the floor because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "Tell me everything. How did you find me? Why did you come?" The cubs settled in her lap, still staying close to the pockets like they were home base in a game of tag. "Started when Papa got strict," Luna began. "Said we had to be perfect. No playing. No laughing. Only learning to be emperors. But we're only 4. Sol protested. 4 is for playing. Found the old stairs one day, Luna continued. The ones behind the ugly painting of great-great-great-grandfather. Nobody uses them. Dust everywhere. But they smelled interesting. Smelled like bread, Sol added. Good bread. Happy bread. Not the fancy bread upstairs that tastes like nothing. Followed the smell down, 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 Luna said, using her paws to show the descent. Found the kitchen. Found you. You were singing, Sol remembered. The song about the bird. We'd never heard singing like that. Palace singing is all perfect and boring. Your singing was broken and beautiful. Watched you for many nights, Luna admitted. You talked to yourself. Told stories about Earth. About your family. About the stars you saw on your journey here. You were lonely like us, Sol said simply. But you made yourself unlonely with songs and stories. We wanted to learn how. Then one night you shared your dinner with nobody, Luna continued. Put half on the counter and said, for whoever needs it more than me. We knew you meant mice, but we were so hungry. Palace food is pretty but not filling, Sol explained. All tiny portions and weird flavors. Your bread was real. After we ate we were cold, Luna said. The servant quarters aren't heated like the royal wings. You had your stones in your pockets so warm. We just wanted to be warm for a minute. But then you started walking and we got scared, Sol admitted. So we stayed very still. You patted us and said, good stones keeping Rosie warm. And we felt safe. Kept coming back, Luna finished. Every night you worked. Learned your schedule. Learned your songs. Learned what love sounds like when nobody's watching. Rosie was crying now, tears she hadn't shed in 20 years rolling down her weathered cheeks. These cubs, these imperial heirs who had everything, had been coming to her for what she didn't even know she was giving. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Heavy boots. Multiple sets. The guards were coming. Rosie could call out right now. She could turn them in. There would be a reward, enough money to buy passage back to Earth, to see her family again, to finally rest after 40 years of labor. All she had to do was say, they're here. The cubs read her mind, or maybe just her face. Children were good at that. Rosie-mama won't give us away, Luna said. It wasn't a question. Rosie-mama loves us, Sol added. We know. We feel it. Here. He put his tiny paw over his heart. 40 years of being invisible. 40 years of being nothing more than hands that made bread. And these two cubs were the only ones in the entire palace who had ever seen her as a person. Who had ever cared that she was lonely. Who had ever thought she was worth visiting. Into the pockets, my loves, she whispered, the decision made. Deep as you can go. And no matter what happens, stay quiet as mice. She tucked them in carefully, arranging the apron's folds to hide the bulges. She pulled out her actual heated stones from her back pocket. She always kept spares, and placed them on the counter. Then she went back to kneading dough as the doors burst open. Captain Thorax stormed in with a full squad of guards. His scanner was beeping like an angry insect, sweeping back and forth across the kitchen. The red light settled on Rosie. You. Servant. State your name and business. Rosie Brennan, sir. Night kitchen duty as I've had for 40 years. The scanner's beeping increased as it swept toward her apron. What's in your pockets? My heated stones, sir. For the arthritis. Old bones don't like these cold kitchens. She gestured to the stones on the counter. I keep spares. Thorak moved closer, the scanner almost touching her apron. In her pockets she could feel the cubs holding their breath, staying impossibly still. She started humming, nerves made her hum, and she felt them relax slightly. It was their bedtime song, the one that always calmed them. The scanner passed over her apron. The real heated stones she'd pulled out confused its readings, their heat signatures mixing with the cub's body warmth. The stone ovens behind her added more interference. The scanner squealed in frustration. Useless machine, Thorak muttered. Can't tell a rock from a rat down here. He looked around the kitchen with disgust. How do you work in this pit? It's home, sir, Rosie said simply. Home. He said it like the word tasted bad. Check the storage rooms, he ordered his guards. Though I don't know why we're bothering. Imperial cubs wouldn't be caught dead down here. As he turned to leave, the air in the kitchen changed. It became heavier, charged with power like the moment before lightning strikes. Emperor Zephyr himself stood in the doorway. Every servant in the kitchen, the few who had started arriving for morning prep, dropped to the floor like their strings had been cut. The guards themselves knelt. Only Rosie remained standing, not out of disrespect but because she couldn't kneel with the weight in her pockets without crushing the cubs. "Your Majesty," she managed, keeping her head bowed so low her chin touched her chest. The Emperor's presence filled the room like water filling a bowl. His telepathic power swept through the kitchen, touching every mind, searching for his children. It brushed against Rosie's thoughts and stopped. You felt them. Not their thoughts, they were shielding too well for that even at 4 years old, but their presence, their warmth, their contentment, and wrapped around them like a blanket, Rosie's protective love. "You, servant, look at me." It was the worst breach of protocol imaginable. Servants never looked at royalty. It was the first rule you learned and the last one you'd break. But this wasn't a request. Rosie raised her eyes and for the first time in 40 years of service, looked directly at Emperor Zephyr. He was magnificent and terrible. His golden mane caught the dim kitchen light and made it spectacular. His eyes, the same golden shade as his cubs, held the weight of 1,000 worlds. But behind all that power she saw something else, a father's fear. His telepathy brushed against her mind again, gentle this time, questioning. She didn't try to hide. She let him see everything. The weeks of visits, the shared food, the songs, the stories, the way the cubs curled into her pockets like they were coming home. The love she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. A tiny movement in her left pocket. Then a small telepathic voice, thinking she was dreaming. "Papa?" The Emperor's eyes went wide. His perfect composure, maintained through 50 years of rule, cracked. "Luna?" The cub's head popped out of the pocket, her golden eyes meeting her father's. "Papa, you found us. We were playing hide and seek and we won." Soul emerged from the other pocket. "Rosie-mama kept us safe and warm. She's the best at hide and seek." The guards gasped. Several actually stepped back. A servant touching royal cubs was death. A servant hiding royal cubs was worse than death. It was the kind of crime they invented new punishments for. But the Emperor wasn't looking at a crime. He was looking at his cubs, really looking at them, for the first time in weeks. They were happy. Their fur was fluffed with contentment. Their eyes were bright with joy. They looked more alive than they had since their rigid training began. "How long?" he asked Rosie, his voice carefully neutral. "They say weeks, Your Majesty." "I didn't know. I thought they were my heated stones. I'm old, my mind sometimes." "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying, Your Majesty. I didn't know until moments ago. But..." She took a breath, knowing the next words might end her life. "But if I had known, I would have kept them anyway. They needed warmth. I had warmth to give. They are imperial heirs. They have everything. With respect, Your Majesty, they have everything but what children need most. Which is love without conditions. Warmth without ceremony. Someone who sees them as children, not future emperors." The Emperor's jaw tightened. "You presume to know what my children need?" "I presume nothing, Your Majesty. I only know that they came looking for something the palace wasn't giving them. And they found it in the pockets of someone too unimportant to matter." "Show me," he commanded. Rosie knelt despite the awkwardness, pulling the cubs fully from her pockets. They immediately clung to her, but she gently directed them to show their father Luna's hurt paw. "The royal healers treated this morning," the Emperor said, recognizing the wound from combat training. "And I treated it just now," Rosie said, showing her simple bandage over the high-tech healing patch. "Why?" "Because sometimes, Your Majesty, healing isn't just about fixing the body. It's about soothing the soul." She unwrapped the paw, showing that her simple bandage had somehow made the high-tech healing work better. The wound was almost gone. "Papa," Luna said, "Rosie-mama's bandage has love in it. That's why it works better." "That's not scientific," the Emperor said automatically. "No," Rosie agreed. "It's not. It's just human." The Emperor looked at her, really looked at her. 40 years she'd been in his palace. 40 years of making bread that fed his guards, his servants, his staff. 40 years of being invisible. And his cubs had found her when he couldn't find them. "Your Majesty looks tired," Rosie said suddenly, then immediately covered her mouth. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." "I am tired," he admitted, surprising everyone, including himself. "I haven't slept since the cubs disappeared." "You should eat something," Rosie said, her caretaker instincts overriding her terror. "When did you last eat?" "I don't remember." Without thinking, moving on 40 years of muscle memory, Rosie pulled a fresh loaf from the oven. She tore off a piece, spread it with butter from the crock, and offered it to the Emperor of known space. "Eat," she said simply. The guards looked ready to faint. Lord Chancellor Voss, who had just arrived, actually did faint. "You didn't offer food to the Emperor." The Emperor had food presented to him on golden plates by specially trained servants after it had been tested for poison, checked for quality, and arranged artistically. But Emperor Zephyr took the bread. He sat, on the kitchen floor. His cubs squealed with delight and sat beside him. And the Emperor of 1,000 worlds ate servants' bread with butter dripping on his pristine robes. "It's good," he said, surprised. "It's made with care," Rosie explained, sitting carefully across from him. "That's the only secret ingredient." "Papa, try it with honey?" Sol said, pulling a small jar from one of Rosie's many pockets. "Rosie-mama always has honey." The Emperor watched his cubs show him how to eat bread and honey, their little paws sticky, their faces bright with happiness. They looked like cubs. Not imperial heirs. Not future rulers. Just cubs enjoying a snack. "How?" he asked Rosie. "How did you make them so happy?" "I didn't make them anything, Your Majesty. I just let them be." "Be what?" "Children."